speaker, and I will turn this over to my partner for the integrative medicine programs and the founder of the programs, Dr. Andrew Heyman.
Thanks so much. When I was told that I would have the honor of introducing Dr. Gordon, it actually made me a little nervous. And the reason is because of, I would say his, I was thinking about what do I want to say? And since, I've known him for many, 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 many years, and, he's had this sort of overlarge impact on my life and the trajectory of my career. And, every once in a while you meet someone who is, a change agent in the most profound way. It's certainly not an overstatement to say Dr. Gordon is not only sort of a founder of the field in general, but someone who's had the ability to imprint his vision on so many people in so many areas of healthcare, and certainly I'm one of those. And he might not realize the degree to which he's had that impact on my life, and I'm sure there are many people out there like me who, were fully inspired by him. And I have his bio here, and it feels very narrow to me, and I'll read parts of it, and I want to fill some other gaps as well that people might not know very much about him. So, Dr. Gordon is Harvard trained. He's a psychiatrist, and of course he's internationally recognized, especially in his work in self-awareness and self-care and group support. He's the founder of the nonprofit Center for Mind-Body Medicine in Washington, D.C., and a clinical professor at Georgetown Medical School, and was the chairman of under President Clinton and G.W. Bush, of the White House Commission on Complementary and Alternative Medicine Policy. It was in 1991 that he founded the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, and the orientation was to create a healing community and a community of healers to make self-awareness, self-care, and group support central to all of healthcare, and to training of healthcare professionals and the education of children. He leads an international faculty of 130 who've trained more than 6,000 clinicians, educators, and community leaders. They've in turn brought the CMBM's therapeutic and educational programming to many hundreds of thousands of traumatized and stressed adults and children, as well as people confronting challenges of anxiety, depression, and chronic and life-threatening illnesses. He is a peacemaker and a consensus builder, and known for his cross-cultural relationship building, as well as deep life-changing therapeutic work for individuals, families, and groups. He's been doing this for more than 25 years, going into traumatized areas, most recently in the Ukraine and the Balkans, Middle East, Africa. I remember in the early days, Kosovo, but also for climate-related disasters in Louisiana, Texas, California, Puerto Rico, and Haiti, as well as communities affected by school shootings and with active duty U.S. military and veterans and families. More recently, over the past 3 years, he's done some work with the Lakota tribe and with tribal elders, teachers, and clinicians in the Pine Ridge Indian reservations in South Dakota to create a program that's married mind-body medicine to traditional Lakota healing, and has been able to stem the tide of youth suicide. His latest book, The Transformation, Discovering Wholeness and Healing After Trauma, helps us understand that trauma will come sooner or later to all of us, and trauma, he explains, is a human experience as opposed to a pathological anomaly. Nobel Peace Prize laureate Archbishop Desmond Tutu has said of Dr. Gordon, "You're really amazing, and we give great thanks to God for the remarkable work you're doing in so many places where God's children are hurting." And I certainly couldn't echo that any more. I think back to his early work. Actually, believe it or not, he wrote several books on cults. Do you remember that, Dr. Gordon, in the early days, funded to identify how individuals would sort of succumb, in a sense, to kind of a group think, and then offer a pathway out of that. But I also think back to your work with another mentor of mine who also had a profound impact, Dr. Max Heyrick. And this was the great insight for me was the role that loving kindness and compassion and mindfulness and traditional healing methods would intersect around social consciousness and social change, for those groups that are marginalized, whether it was the civil rights movement, the reaction to the Vietnam War, the women's movement, the holistic health movement. I don't think people understand the degree to which Dr. Gordon's imprint across many different parts of society in our country has been present in ways that are sort of deep and profound. In addition to that, sort of the influence that he's had on my life, where he showed me that even in the most broken of individuals, the most powerful interventions are often the most simple and ones that are right at our disposal. And he showed me the role that these interventions can play in at-risk groups and in marginalized groups, in the hardest to reach areas of Washington, D.C., for example, and that's where I started my work with him in 1994 and 95. And to show me that despite the powerful nature of drugs and surgery, the role of self-care and mindfulness and community and compassion can play in a really powerful way. So I'm deeply grateful that you're here with us today.
Thank you, Andy. I'm very moved by your introduction and by you. This work that I do, that I'm going to share with all of you today, is you're an embodiment of it, Andy. The whole idea here is to, as we make discoveries about ourselves, as we learn how to better understand and care for ourselves, to be able to share that with others and to serve others. And so I'm very moved by what you had to say, and I'm very pleased to be here with all of you, with Lee and Jeanette, Françoise, and with Misha Kogan, who's here as well, and to be part of this. Even though I'm professor at Georgetown, I feel very much a part of the GW community, and I'm glad to be. And what I'm going to do in this next 50 or 60 minutes or so is to share with you a perspective on trauma and how we approach it at the Center for Mind-Body Medicine. And then I'll conclude with a little bit of sharing with you what I've been doing in Poland and Ukraine. Just got back from Ukraine, where we're beginning to create a program of population-wide trauma healing for the people of Ukraine. I'll be going back again in a couple of weeks. And when I was talking with Misha Kogan, we were corresponding about something else. He said, make sure you talk about Ukraine when you come to so I will at the end. But I think what Andy said is so beautiful, because what we're talking about is a way of being and learning and serving that any of us can do, and that we can share with others, and that as we share it with them, we're also, that's our work. The work that I do, and I believe in one way or another, the work that all of us do is all about service, and it's about service without self-righteousness. It's about service without dogma. It's about service with love and compassion and intelligence and discrimination. So let me give you a talk, and then along with the others, I'll be happy at the end to come back and respond to questions. So Catherine Fleischer is helping me. If I get Catherine, I think you may need you to get me started on this presentation, because I can't see the slides coming up yet. Catherine, can we get the slides? Because I'm not able to advance them here. Okay, well, I don't know. Catherine, are you there? All right, I'm going to have to communicate with her somehow. But I think what I'll do is, while I'm waiting for her to help, I'm going to do something a little bit out of order. I'm going to teach you a technique that I was going to teach a little bit later on, but one for which I don't need a slide, and one that's perfectly appropriate now. I don't know how many of you get frustrated by technology. Lee, what about you? Me too. There are a few things on the planet that get me quite as wound up as when technology doesn't work. Partly because I'm so ignorant and haven't learned very much about it. And one of the things that I've found is that everything that we teach when we talk about mindfulness or meditation or mind-body medicine, it's very, very practical. And one of the arenas in which I really need to practice relaxation and awareness is when I'm contending with technological difficulties. So I'm going to teach you a technique that's fundamental to the work we do at the Center for Mind-Body Medicine. And it's called soft belly breathing. And it's a very simple, Andy mentioned, simple technique. Simple is so beautiful. Simple technique for balancing the fight or flight response, for coming into physiological and psychological balance. And all that's required is for us to breathe. It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to go anywhere in particular. You don't have to spend any money. You don't have to put on special clothes. You don't have to join a group. All that's necessary is to relax and pay attention to our breath. So I'm going to ask you to sit comfortably. And I don't, do I get on the screen along with the slides, or is it just the slides?
We can see you too, but you're small.
Ah, okay. So if everyone, right now, I don't want you to see anything. Right now, all you need to do is allow your breathing to deepen. And breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth with your belly soft and relaxed. This is a very relaxing way to breathe. What I'm teaching you now is a concentrative meditation. It's concentrating on the breath coming in through your nose and going out through your mouth, on our bellies softening and relaxing as we breathe out, and concentrating also on the word soft as we breathe in and belly as we breathe out. And I recommend closing the eyes because it removes a great deal of external stimulation. So if that's comfortable for you, I invite you to do it. If it's not, you can keep your eyes open, but just let your focus be soft and gentle. Breathing slowly and deeply like this, in through the nose and out through the mouth, with belly soft and relaxed. More air goes to the bottom of our lungs, where there's better oxygen exchange. And oxygen, as you know, feeds all the organs and all the cells in our bodies. So as more oxygen enters our bloodstream, because we're breathing slowly and deeply, and more air is coming to the bottom of our lungs, we're feeding all the organs and cells in our bodies. Breathing slowly and deeply like this, in through the nose and out through the mouth, with the belly soft and relaxed, activates the vagus nerve. That's V-A-G-U-S. Vagus means wandering in Latin. And this big nerve wanders up from our belly, through our chest, back to our central nervous system, to our brains. When we activate the vagus nerve by slow, deep, soft belly breathing, we lower blood pressure, slow heart rate, relax the big muscles in our bodies, and improve our digestion. And as we continue to breathe slowly and deeply in through the nose and out through the mouth with our bellies soft and relaxed, we quiet activity in the amygdala, A-M-Y-G-D-A-L-A, a center of fear and anger in our emotional brain. So breathing slowly and deeply like this, in through the nose and out through the mouth, with the belly soft and relaxed, is the antidote to the fear and anger, to the hypervigilance and tension of the fight or flight response. And as we continue to breathe slowly and deeply, we also enhance activity in the frontal part of our cerebral cortex, in areas responsible for thoughtful decision-making and self-awareness and compassion. And one branch of the vagus nerve connects with other nerves that are responsible for facial expression and speech. So when we breathe slowly and deeply, in through the nose and out through the mouth, and keep on breathing like this with our bellies soft and relaxed, we're quieting our bodies, calming the fear and anger in our minds, enhancing our capacity to think clearly and be self-aware, opening the doors to compassion for ourselves and others, and enabling ourselves to tune into other people's facial expressions in their speech so that we can bond with them. All this from slow, deep, soft belly breathing. And as you continue to breathe this way, slowly and deeply, in through the nose, out through the mouth, you can feel all the muscles in your bodies relaxing. So feel that now. Feel the muscles in your belly and your pelvis and your buttocks relaxing as you exhale. Feel the muscles relax in your legs and feet as you exhale. Feel the relaxation now all up and down your spine. Let those muscles go as you exhale. Feel the muscles relax now in your chest and shoulders. We carry a lot of tension, most of us, in our shoulders. Let those muscles relax. Feel the relaxation in your arms and hands. Feel the relaxation now in the muscles of your neck and face and head. Feel your whole body relax with each exhalation. To deepen this relaxation, remember to say to yourself to concentrate on soft as you breathe in and belly as you breathe out. If thoughts come, let them come. Notice them. Let them go. Gently bring your mind back to soft belly. Just a few more slow, deep, soft belly breaths. Now slowly, gently open your eyes. Let your attention come back into the room, onto the screen. So welcome back. You may see, if you're seeing me, excuse me, you're likely seeing me smile. That's what happens spontaneously. As I come into this relaxed state after a few minutes, maybe we did this for 10 or 12 minutes, a smile often just comes onto my face. It's kind of like my mind body, my being is pleased with itself, pleased with simply being and breathing. If I were able to see you, I would be able to see your response when I ask how many of you notice a change. The only one I can see is Lee. So did you notice any change from before till after, Lee?
Oh, it's like night and day. And I also spontaneously smile at the end as well.
That's beautiful. So, you know, this technique is simple and very, very potent. In any group that I've worked with, including in very difficult situations, including sometimes in the middle of a war, 70, 80, 90% of people notice a change. And that's very important. It's important because it is giving us the message, you can make a difference in how you feel. When we have been traumatized, when we're depressed, when we're dealing with chronic illness of any kind, there is a tendency, if not a likelihood, that we're going to feel at least somewhat hopeless and helpless. It's been going on so long. I don't know if I can make a change. I don't know if it's ever going to change. Simply doing soft belly breathing gives us the message, change is possible. I can make it happen. It's not about anybody preaching to you. It's not even about reading the research, although that's helpful. It's your own experience that's telling you that there is some control. And even in the middle of a war, you may not be able to stop the bombs from falling or the homes from being destroyed, but you can at least have some control over how you react, how you respond. And as you feel that sense of control, it becomes easier to deal with even extremely difficult situations. And the way our mind works, the message is not only that we're not helpless, that we can help ourselves, but we're not hopeless, because if we can make one change, the mind understands that other change is also possible. So this is a beautiful technique. There are on the Center for Mind-Body Medicine website. You can take a look at it. I teach it. The script for it is there in my book, Transforming Trauma. So simple to use. We did it 10 or 12 minutes now. We use soft belly breathing at the beginning of all our meetings at the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, and usually at the end, to begin, let go of what's been happening, to come into the present moment, and then when we're getting ready to leave, to let go of where we have been and be ready for what's next. So what's next now is I think I'm going to be able to show you some slides. Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, Catherine. This is a little bit about the Center for Mind-Body Medicine. And again, is there a way we can make these slides available to people if they'd like them?
They already are, actually. Janet has them in a Dropbox, and you will, the link is in the chat, but I'm sure she'll pop it in there again.
Fantastic. So as you heard from Andy, I started the Center for Mind-Body Medicine in 1991, and for exactly the reasons that he described. I wanted to help. I decided that the best way for me to work was not to work within Georgetown, where I was and am a clinical professor, that I would have the freedom that I needed while still doing work at Georgetown, the freedom that I needed to work with people in institutions and practices and communities all over. And I didn't know how far it would extend, but I knew that if I created my own organization, I could help people like those of you at GW to move ahead and make the changes that you wanted to make. And that where it was appropriate, I could be somebody who could help you to do that. And that's the role that I've taken. That's the role the Center for Mind-Body Medicine has taken. We are teaching, we're sharing, we're training people. We're offering what we have to offer and saying, here it is, and make use of it as much as you'd like. Partner with us as deeply as you would like. I need help in advancing. It got stuck again. There we go. This is the center. These are some of the places we've worked in. We've grown since the little bio that Andy was reading. We have 160 international faculty. Here are some of the places where we're working in the US and around the world. And we've trained probably about 7,000 people now have come through our mind-body medicine training, and another 3,000 through our comprehensive nutrition training, our food as medicine program. This is, Andy and I can say nice things about Center for Mind-Body Medicine. Here's somebody totally outside. There's Tina Rosenberg from the New York Times speaking about the program we're doing with veterans. And now that program has grown significantly. We're now working with the largest division of the VA. One of the things that's happening, and I suppose one of the reasons the seminar is happening is because the world is changing. That more and more people and more health professionals are realizing we need something more. We need to shift the way we're doing things. We need to focus more on self-care and mutual support. We need to reach out and include the healing methods of other people, of indigenous people, as well as some of the high classical systems of medicine like Indian Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine. So we're in a larger world now. And the medicine for trauma that we're sharing, which I'll come to in a little bit, is not just in this spirit of expanding what medicine is about. We're both expanding, but we're also returning to our roots. The word radical means from the roots. And we're going back to the roots of medicine in the systems of indigenous people. And there was an understanding, and there still is an understanding among indigenous people. Of course, you have to treat an illness or a physical trauma or distress as it arises. And yes, that's the first level. That's the first level of healing. The next level is going to the causes, going to whether they're nutritional or exercise or whatever the social causes, economic causes, looking at the causes. And the highest level of our profession, of our vocation, of our calling, is to help ourselves and other people live in harmony with our nature and with the natural, social, and spiritual world. So it's more than prescribing drugs. It's more even than doing preventive medicine. Perhaps we can think of it as the true public health, the health for all the people. This is a quote that's been important to me from Franz Kafka, who was a great Czech writer. He wrote in German and lived over 100 years ago and lived through the First World War and knew suffering, personal suffering, collective suffering. And he said with such wisdom, you can hold yourself back from the sufferings of the world. That is something you're free to do, and it accords with your nature. But perhaps this very holding back is the one suffering you could avoid. I want to make a little correction to my teacher, Franz Kafka. I don't know if that's our nature. Kafka got kind of cynical, understandably, if you knew how he grew up and the world he lived in. I'm not sure. I think it accords with our practice and with our social ideas that we should hold ourselves back from suffering. But in fact, what I have found, what I continue to find, is that when I allow myself to experience the suffering that is mine, and when I allow myself to respond with an open heart to the suffering of others, I relieve my suffering. Avoidance doesn't do it. Suppressing, pretending it's not there, it all comes back. All comes back later on. We do that to protect ourselves, but we don't do that to heal ourselves. To heal ourselves, we need to allow ourselves to experience the suffering that comes to us, not the unnecessary suffering, but the true pain that's really there. And then to allow ourselves to be present with others, to be available to others who are also suffering. So trauma. Trauma is a word that has become very widely used. And I think basically it's a good thing, because we need to pay attention to trauma, to the injury, to body, mind, and spirit. It's a Greek word that means injury. To the body, mind, and spirit. The trauma that will come to all of us. None of us is immune. Up till fairly recently, we've had the idea that trauma, that only comes to those other people, combatants or civilians in the middle of a war, people with the most horrific childhoods. In fact, it's not true. Trauma is a part of human life. It may come early in life if we have a congenital abnormality, if there's a lot of sickness, if we're not properly cared for, if our parents are poor or our neighborhood is violent. If it doesn't come then, it may well come in young adulthood or midlife as we suffer disappointments and losses of meaningful relationships, or disappointments in our career, or death of parents or grandparents. And if it doesn't come then, it will surely come as we grow old and become physically frail and face inevitable losses and our inevitable death. It's a part of life. Now, major causes are here. These are some of the ones that are most obvious of trauma. You can read this for yourself at your leisure. One way to think about the consequences of trauma is that the human organism, as it grows and develops, it becomes both more complex and more capable of specialization. And if you think of yourself growing up and coming into your late teens and 20s, you're able to deal with much more. You sort of, can wrap your arms around more, and you can think things through more clearly. And you can respond with more parts of yourself and your own history. You're becoming more complex. That's part of the process of development. And also you can focus in a way you may never have been able to before. When trauma comes, it disrupts that process of growth and development. And it disrupts it in two ways. One is it can create chaos, agitation, fearfulness, difficulty focusing, difficulty concentrating, just uneasiness, or it can shut us down and keep us from moving forward. And sometimes, often enough, it does both. We're working with the New York City firefighters after 9/11, and you may remember or have read that over 300 firefighters died on 9/11. And all the firefighters looked at each other as brothers and sisters. Weren't too many sisters at that time, but they were part of the family as well. So when those 300, and they happened to be all guys, when they died, it was like brothers had died. And the firefighters who survived, many of them had kind of manifestations of both this chaotic agitation and also the exhaustion and the inability to move forward, that are the two major aspects of what happens to us when we've been traumatized. Post-traumatic stress disorder, psychiatric diagnosis, that I'd like to think of in this context, that in post-traumatic stress, or the disorder, which means the symptoms of post-traumatic stress, coupled with an inability to function normally, the fight or flight response that is meant to protect us from a predator that we owe to our vertebrate ancestors. It's there, all vertebrates have fight or flight response. It continues, either because the trauma is continuing, as it has through the COVID pandemic. I don't know how many people, just about everybody I know, has experienced some trauma from the pandemic and has experienced some agitation, some more difficulty sleeping, some difficulty focusing, maybe more irritable with the kids, or kids more impatient with their parents. And many, many people have also had that frozen, shut down feeling that is also at its base a life-saving mechanism, playing possum, for example. It's a way to preserve oneself from a predator who you hope will ignore you. Well, that's a little bit of a projection or teleology onto animals. I don't know if they're hoping or not, but they have responses that do protect themselves, like the mouse if your pet cat catches mice and the cat's carrying around the mouse in its mouth, the mouse will be kind of slumped over. It may be slumped over because it's dead, but it may also be slumped over because it's gone into a freeze response. It's shut down. And what happens, and I've watched this, I used to live on a farm with a bunch of cats. Cat will put the mouse down, and if the mouse is still alive, she'll shake herself off, run off to the mouse hole. She was in freeze response. It came quickly and left quickly. Fight or flight also comes quickly and leaves quickly. The gazelle at the watering hole, and the lion comes and chases. If she gets away, 3 minutes later, she's happily grazing. When we have been traumatized and the trauma is not resolved, fight or flight and freeze persist, and they shut us down. They inhibit us. They make us agitated, make us anxious, hypervigilant. All of these things come. So the work of trauma healing begins with creating antidotes to both fight or flight and freeze response. And here's a picture. These are kids, high school students at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, where they suffered the trauma of a school shooting that killed 17 people, 14 students and three staff. And they're doing soft belly breathing. And incidentally, we're training these young people to use mind-body medicine with adults and with people their age and with people who are younger. So they are now leading mind-body skills groups and sharing these skills in classrooms and with other students and with their parents. Another way to think about trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder is that it's a kind of fixation. We're stuck. Even if the trauma has passed, as with the firefighters whom I described, or with these kids, they're still replaying in nightmares, in flashbacks, the trauma that they have experienced. So trauma is a kind of fixation. And meditation, what meditation does is it dissolves that fixation. It unsticks us. It allows us to move into the moment, allows us to be present and to move forward, so that the nightmares and the flashbacks, even when they happen, they no longer have the capacity to drag us back for the rest of the day into that distressed state. We see them as we wake, we learn to relax with them. And the more we use techniques like soft belly breathing, the more able we are to free ourselves from the consequences of trauma. So I've said it here already. Post-traumatic stress disorder, post-traumatic stress is a mixed picture, and prolonged fight or flight and prolonged freezing. So agitation, feeling overwhelmed, intrusive thoughts, nightmares, all of those things come. As I said, trauma healing begins with restoring psychological and physiological balance. And here are some kids in Haiti where we've been working since 2010, since the earthquake. And there's their teacher in the front of the room, getting them to do an active expressive meditation. These kids, they crack me up. One of the things about doing this work, and I just want to say this to all of you, is the work you do should be a joy. So the work, whatever it is, whether you're a surgeon or you're a psychotherapist or you're a licensed practical nurse, whatever you are, it should be a work that is joyful for you. And it's one of the reasons I like to spend at least some time with kids, because it's just about always fun to work with them. So we're using here expressive meditations, and there are basically three kinds of meditation. There are thousands of techniques. Concentrative meditation, we did, maybe 7,000 or 8,000 years old, as best we know, from scriptures from northern India. There's mindfulness meditation, becoming aware of thoughts, feelings, and sensations as they arise. And then there's expressive meditation. And these are the oldest ones on the planet. If you go to the caves in the south of France or Spain, north of Spain, you'll see the humans dancing with the animals. It's an expressive meditation. It's the hunt, but the hunt is a meditation as well. And expressive meditations are foundational for dealing with psychological trauma. And here I am with Rosemary Lombard, who is I'm now the CEO at the, we changed our titles a little. I'm the CEO, she's the executive director. We're here in New Orleans at an intentional community called Bastion for American service members with traumatic brain injury. And we're there for a day. We're talking about my book. I'll show you the book. People see the book here? We have a different title from the one that Andy mentioned. It's now called Transforming Trauma. Anyway, we're there to celebrate Bastion, to do a book signing for the book, and we did some expressive meditation with the people who were there. Expressive meditations are the best for that physical tension, for that rumination, for bodies that have been shut down and depleted and frozen by trauma. And when you do expressive meditations, they also bring up emotions that have been buried. Once again, at the Center for Mind Body Medicine website, we don't have time to do it right now. You can watch me teaching shaking and dancing, which is one of the expressive meditations, and I think fast, deep, chaotic breathing as well. And the whole script for it is in Transforming Trauma. And you can do this. The shaking and dancing, which is the simplest one, anybody can do. There are some caveats for the very fast, deep breathing. But shaking and dancing, you can do it if you're in a wheelchair. And just do it. Do it for 5 minutes of shaking, a couple minutes of being quiet and still, and then letting your body move to music. Very simple, very powerful, and it breaks up and melts those trauma-frozen bodies and gets to bring up some of those emotions that we suppress because they're uncomfortable or they scare us or because we think we're not supposed to have them. This is one of the sort of terrible calamities of our society, is that we look, and of our medical work as well, we look askance at emotions. One of the difficulties for people, I don't know how many of you experienced this during the pandemic, is feeling so overwhelmed by what's going on and not feeling it was okay to say, you know, I don't feel good, or I'm so angry, or I'm so sad, or I'm so, because we're supposed to be so tough. We're supposed to be stoical and tough it out and get through it. I work a lot with cops and veterans as well as with health professionals. It's all the same, that idea. You got to get through it. If you're a real professional at this job, you don't show your emotions. But what happens is we suffer. We suffer unnecessarily. Whereas if we can allow the emotions to come up, if we can allow that freedom, then it's not only the uncomfortable emotions that will arise more easily, it's also the ones of joy and of pleasure and of kindness and of love that come up more easily. We have to break up these fixed patterns. And once we start to do that, then everything else that we may use for healing becomes so much easier. And this is a group, Sabrina, my dear friend and colleague, my sister Sabrina Njai, who's in yellow there, is leading a small group. And I think this is, I'm trying to think, this may be in New Orleans. I'm not sure where this is, wherever we're working. And it's just to remind me to say to you that all the other techniques that you may use, whether it's conventional medical techniques or self-care techniques or psychotherapy, everything works much better, comes more easily once we begin to bring ourselves into physiological, psychological balance. I'm looking at the time. Okay, groups are very important as part of this process. This is our clinical director, Linda Rixmeyer-Sear, and when we do a training program, we may have 200 people in a training. We'll have 20 of our faculty, 20 of those 160 faculty, and they will be leading small groups with 10 people in each group. Once again, our Aboriginal brothers and sisters have understood this for just about as long as there have been humans, is that when you have a significant issue or problem, a group enhances significantly and may even be necessary to the healing that we need. In traditional societies, the ones I know of, if you have a minor problem, you've got a cold, you've got a little sprain, you're having a little trouble with your spouse or your partner, your kids, you go to your granny, your grandmother, or somebody else's granny, and she's got the appropriate teachings to give you. If it's a big problem, life-threatening illness, psychosis, suicidal thoughts, you go to the official healer, whatever that official healer's name is. Witch doctor. I have a friend in Mozambique, a colleague in Mozambique, who calls himself Dr. Witch. Wise woman, curandera, sangoma, shaman. And those people will most often bring a group together for the healing. We use groups in our training. We teach you how to lead these groups. Those kids from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School are learning how to lead groups. And here are some of the principles of the group. I won't go through this in detail. Once again, you can read much more about these groups, both on our website and also in Transforming Trauma. But the groups are meditative. We're encouraging people to be present in the moment. And you're there for yourself. And we create a safe place with confidentiality where everybody has a chance to speak. Nobody's shortchanged, and nobody's more important than anybody else. Everybody's respected. Every group you learn a technique. One of the reasons many groups get a little old rather fast is because people just are repeating the same thing over and over again. Our groups, there's a kind of dynamism to it because each group, you're learning a tool or technique, and then you're sharing with others what you've learned. So there's both a sense of self-discovery, a sense of learning and growing, and a sense of connection and sharing with other people. Other thing that's really important is that the leader also shares. This is a different model. In a sense, it's a democratization, not only of medicine in the broadest sense of the word medicine, but of the role of the healer. Shamans, they used to do it. They knew the drill, they knew the skills. They didn't tell anybody else about it. Doctors, a little bit the same. We know, we got the answers, we're going to do it, we'll write the prescription. This is a different model, and I'm not saying that's necessary at times, but for most of the issues, most of the problems that most of us have most of the time, there is no magic bullet. There is no surgical procedure that's going to make everything okay. And we have the capacity to do it ourselves. And our work is to teach people how to do it themselves, people of every age and educational level. And once we embark on this path, we not only can relieve the symptoms and come back into balance, we can make discoveries and find ourselves in a place of greater meaning and purpose and integrity and love than we've ever been. This is Aboriginal understanding, and modern psychology calls it post-traumatic growth. Here's some research. We published about 25 studies on our model. This is the first randomized controlled trial of any intervention with war traumatized, not just adolescents, kids at any age. There was an 82% reduction in the numbers of those qualifying for the diagnosis of PTSD after they participated in 11-week, actually 12-week, sometimes it was 11, sometimes 12 mind-body skills groups. Very important finding, obviously very powerful intervention. We've replicated this a number of times with different populations. Just as important as the improvement was who led the groups. It wasn't me. It wasn't Linda, whom I showed you, or Sabrina. It was people we trained. In this case, rural high school teachers led these groups, whom we trained and provided ongoing mentorship and supervision to. We work many places, and these are the stages. I won't go into this in detail. If any of you is interested in bringing our program to your organization, your community, your university, please, we can get in touch. But basically, just be in touch with me. We reach out, we connect with people. That's what I'm doing in Poland and Ukraine right now. I was just there a few weeks ago. I'm going back a couple of weeks, and reach out to people and see who's here, who wants to work with us. In Poland and Ukraine, it was wonderful psychiatrists who are leaders in their field in their respective countries, who have wide range of connections with groups. We create a program. We bring together the people who really want to learn what we have to teach, first for themselves, and then to share it with others. And we have a comprehensive training program. And you can look on our website, it's 10 days of training, and then it's 6 months, 8 months, a year of mentorship and supervision. And then we develop a local leadership team everywhere we go. So when we've worked with medical schools, everything that we do in the medical school is completely sustainable. After a while, the medical school doesn't need the Center for Mind-Body Medicine any longer, because the faculty in the medical school and or the students have learned the method and they're using it. They're using it with students, they're using it with faculty, they're using it with their patients. And we're there to help and just to make things, when challenges come up, to be there to consult with, to help connect you with the larger universe of people who are doing this work. So we're now working in Ukraine and Poland. And these first couple shots, this is just an example, it's a very powerful example right now at this moment in history of how this work grows. The picture on the left, sitting with a group of Ukrainian psychotherapists in a house in the western part of Poland. And they've all fled. These are mostly women. There's one young guy, dad with a little kid, but women, and there are some children and grandmothers with them as well. So, and I think that's Eva in the orange sweater. She's the one who brought us to the place. She's the psychiatrist. The other picture, I'm sitting with a psychologist from Ukraine, and this is in Warsaw, and she's telling me about fleeing with her two 10-year-old twin daughters and talking to me about how painful it was to leave behind her husband who's fighting. And this is what's happening there, is that the women and children are leaving. By and large, some are staying, but many are leaving. Their husbands are staying behind. They're fighting. Their lives are obviously at risk in what is a fight to the death. I'm not going to show you this video now. I want to show you this picture of this is in Ukraine. This is in Lviv, in the western part of Ukraine, and you may wonder why it's red. That's because I arrived in Lviv, in Ukraine, and I got to the long story about the journey there. I finally got to my hotel and had a meeting, and the man on the right is Roman Kecker, who's a very distinguished psychiatrist, professor of psychiatry, and leads many of the psychiatric and psychotherapeutic associations in Ukraine. And at Roman's right is a translator, Roxoliana. And the reason everything is red is because just about as soon as our meeting started, air raid sirens went off because Russian planes were flying over. And so we had to go to the red lit basement of the hotel where I was staying. And this is where we had our meeting. So I wanted to tell you that just to show you the faces and give you a little feeling for what it's like there. And this, I spent about 5 or 6 days in Poland and about as long in Ukraine. And the idea is to reach out to people who are potential partners, and also to understand what's happening there. And one of the things that I think is really important that's happening in Ukraine, and that's also happening in its own way in Poland, is that the best in human beings is coming to the fore. That in Ukraine, everybody is taking care of everybody else. And the welcome that I received and that others receive who are friends to the Ukrainian people, who have something to offer, was so overwhelmingly positive, such warmth, such openness. And the interest in the tools and techniques that we had to teach was also so great. And the sense is that the trauma, the understanding there is that the trauma, and many people said this quite literally to me, we have war and trauma in our DNA. There have been fighting there really since the 1930s. And the fighting, this most recent war, didn't start 2 months ago or 3 months ago. It started 8 years ago in Crimea, when the Russians took over Crimea and Ukrainians began to fight back. And they have been experiencing this trauma in an ongoing way for these 8 years. And the DNA is there because the people in Ukraine and also the people in Poland lived through both Stalinist oppression, mass murder and deportation, and also the mass murder of the Nazis. So this is very much there. This is part of their identity, part of who they are, part of the trauma that they bring forward from their grandparents and their parents, and is now being reawakened in their lives. And so the approach that we're doing, the idea is to go to Ukraine, as I did, to work on a large scale in Ukraine, and also with all those who are working with Ukrainian refugees. Now, up to this point, our largest program has been in Gaza, that little strip of land, that occupied territory. And we've trained over 1,000 people in Gaza, many of them school teachers and counselors, as well as doctors, nurses, leaders of women's groups, clergy. And they in turn have worked with 280,000 children and adults. And that program is going to expand significantly. The Ministry of Education wants us to work with all 250,000 kids in the public school system. So that's a big program. The program in Ukraine, we're hoping to be able to train several thousand people over time to work with an entire population in Ukraine, as well as with the refugees, to train the local people, the psychiatrists and the psychotherapists and the nurses and the teachers and the clergy and the leaders of women's groups and the leaders in the villages and towns, and also the veterans and the people who have been fighting and are still fighting. So I want to end with this last picture. When I got to the bus station to take the bus from Lviv back to Warsaw, there was a guy there. There was a wonderful Ukrainian woman took me to the bus station, and she and I were just sort of looking around. Where is the bus to Warsaw? We were kind of lost. And this guy was there, and I just asked him, do you know where the bus to Warsaw is? And it happened he was going on the same bus. We started talking. And it turned out he was a German Special Forces soldier. He'd been in German Special Forces for 12 years. He'd become disillusioned with the military, with the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. He moved to Sweden, but when Russia attacked Ukraine, he felt it was necessary for him to be there. That this is the way that he could use the skills, the very high level of military skills he had, to help protect the people who were being invaded and being oppressed. So we got to talk and we got to be friends. And I gave him a copy of my book and we did a little breathing together. And he's ready to come to our training in mind-body medicine. So I want to conclude. His name is Martin Otto. And I want to conclude with him because it's such a beautiful example of that Kafka quote of he was not only helping to relieve the suffering of the Ukrainian soldiers and the volunteers, some of whom are professionals, but most of whom don't know what they're doing at all. Is not only able to help the Ukrainian people, he was able to relieve his own suffering, his own feeling that he had not done what he had hoped to do when he decided to become a soldier. He was able to be a soldier in a cause that he felt was just and right. So in a sense, this is an invitation to all of you to consider, first of all, to appreciate who you are and what you're doing, and to appreciate the fact that you are, just about everybody who's here, engaged in relieving the suffering of others, and that it also is an opportunity for you to relieve your own suffering. So I want to tell you that first. Second of all, I want to emphasize the importance of learning how to understand and care for yourself as a basis for teaching others to do the same. You really can't help others to help themselves unless you're also embarked on that journey yourself. And finally, this is an invitation to join the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, to become part of this healing community. And this is just descriptions of what we hope to do in Ukraine that you can look at your leisure. And if you want to be part of what we're doing in Ukraine, want to support that work, we invite you to do that. If you want to learn how to do this work, you can read my book, Transforming Trauma, this wonderful quote from my late friend, Desmond Tutu. And you can, here's the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, and you can connect with us And here are some ways you can connect with us. I guess you already have the copy of the presentation. We have online mind-body skills groups that you can join, total sliding scale. You pay what you can afford. We're here to train you, to invite you to be part of this training program that we have that's ongoing here in the United States as well as overseas. And if you're interested in a larger partnership, whether it's with the GW community or with other communities to which you belong, please get in touch with us as well. So thank you once again. Thank you, Lee and Jeanette and Andy, and for having me. It's great to be here.
Thank you very much for sharing with us your important work. And I hope it's inspirational to many of us who probably could use a little bit of inspiration during this difficult time that we're all going through. So with that, we are going to take a quick break until 3:20, when we will move on to our last speaker before the panel session, Dr. Lorenzo Norris. So please do come back at 3:20, and we'll see you soon.